Hi there, my name is Gaurav, and in this video we're going to be talking about two very important concepts in JavaScript, which is the debounce and the throttle functionalities. So these concepts are not just used for development, but it's very popular in the interviews as well. So just follow along and let's try to explore why do we need this and how do we implement this. Now I'm first of all going to show you exactly where it's been used in the web development. So let me just switch over to my browser. Now I'm in the browser and you can see that I have Amazon website opened up. And we have this search functionality in Amazon, which gives us auto suggest. So for example, if I type in MacBook Pro, you can see all the auto suggest options given to us. Let's see what's happening in the background. So I'm going to be opening up inspect. Let's make this a little bit bigger, go to the network tab. And in this, I'm going to be start typing up some additional stuff. So let's type in adapter, hub, and charger. Okay, so as I was typing, you can see that a lot of request was sent back to the server. Let's try to open the request and see what's happening in here. Okay, so you can see it. Let me just zoom it in a bit. And in this, we can see that a lot of request was sent. Along with this, we are sending this prefix data. As you can see, it was exactly as what I was typing in here. And if I just go to the next request, you can see the letters appearing one by one. So that means every single keystroke was sent back to the Amazon server, and based on that, the auto suggest suggestions was presented to us. Now this is actually not the very optimal way of doing it, and I'm pretty sure Amazon has really optimized their server. That's why they are able to do this. But in general, when you're developing a website, you do not want every keystroke to be sent back to the server. Let me show you another example of another e-commerce site called Flipkart, which is again very famous. Let me do the inspect of this website. Let's go to the network tab and let's type in something over here. So I'm going to be again typing in as MacBook. Let's put it as charger and hub. Okay. Now over here you can see that auto suggest request was sent, but it was very less compared to the one on Amazon. Let's open this up. And in this you can see we have this query which says M. Let's check out what's the next one. So if I just open up over here, you can see the next query is not A, it's the entire MacBook and then a T after that. So if we check the next one, it is the removing of the T. Then again, I had added some characters, and over here it was the entire phrase MacBook charger and hub. So you can see a lot less requests were being sent in the case of Flipkart as compared to Amazon. So this result in lesser load on your server and obviously paying lesser fees to your service provider as well. Okay, so this is the concept of debounce, in which you basically type in, and as soon as you take a pause, only then the request is being sent back to the server. So this helps you to not only keep the user experience in mind, but also helps you with the performance of your overall website. So let's see how we can be implementing this. So I'm going to switch back to my coding environment. Let's go back. And in this, I have created a dummy HTML file. And let me just show you what's there over here. I'll say go live so that we have something to see. And it's basically a search bar and some dummy section. Let's open up the inspect tab. And if I go to the console, we see that when we type in, nothing happens. So let's hook up this thing and see how we can be sending the request in a debounced manner. So switching back to the code, I already have the debounce.js added. So I'll go to the debounce file. And in here, we are going to be first adding the event listener. So I'll say const search input equals to document.get element by id search box. So this gives me the search box. And over here I can add an event listener. So I can say search input dot add event listener, and I want a listener on input. So this is going to be basically on every keystroke we are going to be handling the event. And over here let's say search. Okay, and I'm going to be creating a function called as search. So I'll say function search, and in here we can basically say console.log search input.value. So this should basically print out the value. Let's go back to our browser and see if this works. So I'm switching back, and over here if I just type in, you can see that every keystroke is being sent as an event. So basically every single keystroke, like we saw in the case of Amazon, is going to be sent back to the server. So this is obviously not the best way of handling it, and it's not debounced. So let's see how we can be debouncing this. So going back to the code. Now the concept of debounce is basically based on the concept of set timeout that you have in JavaScript. So for example, let's create a function called debounce and let's declare it as a function. And the debounce function is basically going to be taking in a function that you want to debounce and the delay that you would like to add. So basically between the keystrokes, how much delay should be there, and only then the function should be called. So let's call this as delay. All right. So what we are going to do over here, this search is going to be basically debounce. So we can type in over here as debounce. And in this, we are going to be passing in the search and the delay. Let's say we want to be adding 1 second of delay. And this is obviously going to be in milliseconds. Okay, so this part is done. The next part is we need to be returning a function to this. Basically, add event listener needs a function to run. So here we need to be returning a function. So I'll say return function. And we need to be returning something over here. So since we need to delay the function execution, we're going to be using set timeout. And set timeout is basically running with the timeout of the delay that's passed in. So we'll put it as delay. And over here, instead of running this function, we are going to be sending in the function that we get as a parameter. Just like that. Okay, so this part looks fine. Let's see what is the output right now. So I'm just saving this file, switching back to my browser. Let's type in ABC. And we do see that after some time ABC got printed, that is after 1 second, but still the number of times that the request was sent is still 3. So we had 3 characters, and for every character the request was being sent, which is not right. So let's switch back and see how we can optimize this. Now basically the problem over here is set timeout is being called for every keystroke. So we need to be only sending the timeout if there is a sufficient delay, and we need to cancel out all the previous timeout if it already exists. So for that reason, what we can do is we can basically use the timeout in a variable. So what we can do is we can declare a variable over here. We'll say const timer, or let's make it as actually let timer because we're going to be modifying the value. And over here, I'll say timer equals to set timeout. Okay, so now we have this timeout in a variable. So with that done, what I can do is I can clear the timeout over here by saying timer. So basically what happens over here, on every keystroke, we are clearing out the previous timer and then setting up a new timer with the delay. So with that done, let's see if we get the desired output. So I'm just going to be saving this and let's switch back. Let's type in ABC. And then we see that we do get the ABC, and this time it's being sent only once. Now, if I just try to type in something really fast without adding much delay, you can see it's not really sending the console.log. And if I just stop for some time, that's when the request is being sent back to the server. And this is basically debouncing of the function. So let's go back to our code. Let's just revise it once. So basically what we're doing, we call the debounce with the function that we want to debounce and the delay that we want to add. Then since the add event listener requires a function to execute, we're returning a function from here, and we have the timeout saved into a variable, and we're basically clearing the timeout whenever we are hitting any keystroke. Now, as a side note, when you're giving interviews, you're also going to be facing a very popular question that is of closures. And this is actually a very good example of closure. So here, this timer variable actually acts like a closure variable. So basically we're returning the function, and this thing actually remains within the scope of that internal function. So that's the major concept of closure. I'm not going to go more in depth for it, but just remember that this is a very good example of closure as well. So we saw how debounce works. Now, before we go to throttle, I would like to show you a shortcut of doing debounce when you are working in a real project. You're not just going to be writing this code. There's a shortcut of doing this. There's a very popular library called as Lodash. So if you have not really heard about it, you can just go and search for Lodash. So that's going to be the first entry, and it gives you a lot of functions related to arrays, objects, and some utility functions as well. And one of the functions that's provided by Lodash is called as debounce. So if I just switch back to my browser, and if I just open up my index.html, I have this already added over here. You can see I have the script tag in which I have loaded the Lodash. And if I just go to the debounce, let me just basically comment this out for now. I'm going to be using the Lodash debounce function. So what I can do is whenever you have Lodash in the HTML, it automatically gives you a global variable called underscore. So you can say underscore dot debounce. So this is the Lodash library. Dot debounce is the function in the Lodash library. So if I do that and try to save it, now I've commented out my own Lodash function. And if I just switch back to the browser, go to our page, and let's try to run that once again. Let's say hello. And we can see that after the delay, hello is printed. And if I just keep typing something, there's not going to be any output until I stop, just like that. So that was the Lodash functionality of using debounce as well. But you should also know how to be writing your own in case it's asked in the interview. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is throttle. And it is sort of similar to debounce, but it's used in different cases. So throttling is basically limiting the rate of something. So let's go back to our browser. And in this, let's take the example that you want to be building an analytics application which tracks the mouse event. Now, trust me, this is quite popular, where you are going to be tracking the mouse movement on the website. This helps you to track as which are the popular sections on your website where the person is moving the mouse. For example, you have the search button. Is the person going in this area or missing the button altogether? Is the person able to find the search bar, and so on? So there are a lot of analytics related to the mouse movement itself. So let's suppose you want to be tracking the mouse movement. How can you do that? So let's switch back to our code base, and I'm just going to be stopping my server which was running, and I'm going to be running it in the throttle file this time. So I'll say go live. Okay, so now I'm running my throttle.html. Looks the same, but it's a different file. Let's open up the console. Okay, now let's go back to the code. Let's close this off, and I'm going to be opening up the throttle.js. Okay, now over here, I'm going to be adding a function called mouse analytics. And in this, I'm going to be saying console.log. And over here, we're going to be getting an event, mouse event. And over here, we can track the mouse X and Y. So you can say e.client X, and Y position is going to be e.client Y, just like that. Okay, so we have the function ready. Now we can also add the event tracker for the mouse. So I can say document.add event listener. So over here, I'll say mouse move, and in the function, I can put up as mouse analytics. So that's pretty much it to track the mouse event. Let's go back to a browser, and you can see as I move the mouse, the X and Y coordinate of the mouse is getting printed. Now just imagine if at this rate, you're going to be sending the data to your server. Pretty sure your server is going to crash very soon, especially when you have loads of users doing the same thing. So what we need over here is we need to be sending this analytics data at a throttled rate. So maybe we want to be sending it per second, or maybe per 500 milliseconds and so on. So we can obviously control that, but we do not need to be sending it in real time like it's getting sent now. So this is one of the use case when throttle is used. Another use case when you can use throttle is maybe you want to be doing some calculation based on the dragging of some items. Let's suppose you have some library where you drag and drop items, and you want to be doing some calculation based on that. Again, you're going to be most probably throttling the request so that you do not overload your JavaScript browser as well. So sometimes you want to be doing some resizing of the elements based on the resizing of the browser. So again, you can use the throttle function. So let's see how we can be writing this throttle function. So again, as usual, we are going to be creating a generalized throttle function which can be used to throttle any other function. So I'll say function throttle, just like that. And it's again going to be taking a function, and let's put it as limiter. All right. So over here, as usual, we are going to be sending it to the throttle, and we are going to be moving this mouse analytics inside, and say the limiter is going to be 1 second. So that's 1000 milliseconds. Okay, so that's done. Now we basically need to be returning a function here again. So we'll say return function. So let's see how this will work. So over here, I'm going to be starting off with an initial timer. So let's suppose let previous time equals to 0. And whenever we are moving the mouse, this function is going to be called. So we need to be getting the current time. So I'll say let current time equals to new date dot get time. All right. So this will give you the current timestamp in milliseconds. So what we're going to do over here is we're going to be checking that if current time minus the previous time is greater than the limiter. So this means we have basically passed the time of the last execution and we need to be executing this mouse analytics function. So I can say over here as mouse analytics and I can just pass in the arguments. And since we need to be returning this back to the event listener, this has to be added in return as well. So that's pretty much it what we need to do. Let's try to see if this works. I'm going to be moving back to my browser. And over here we see that still we are tracking all the mouse movement and it's not getting throttled. So let's see what's the mistake that we have done. So going back, we see that we have actually checked and we have returned the mouse analytics, but we are not really set the previous time to the current time. So we are going to be basically setting as previous time equals to current time. So this will basically set the previous time as the execution time. And next time we come, we are going to be having the previous execution time and we know the difference whether the limiter has passed or not. And one more fix to do over here is instead of calling the mouse analytics, we need to call the generalized function, which is the fn that was passed right here. And if you're not clear, arguments is basically going to be picking up all the arguments that are passed and forward it to this particular function. Okay, let's go back to our browser and let's try to move the mouse now. Now, as I move, you can see that although I'm moving it at a good rate, the function is getting called only at the limited amount that we had specified earlier. And this is basically the concept of throttling. I hope it's clear. Let's just go back to our code. And like we saw in the case of debounce, we can also use the Lodash throttle function. So I'll just comment this out like this. And instead of using the throttle over here, I can say underscore dot throttle, just like that. And let's try to save this and run it again. Underscore is not defined. Let's just go back to my index.html. If I just go down, I see that I do not have the particular script added over here. So let's just go to the other one and just copy the script from here, add it to throttle as well. Make sure that you're adding the script above the throttle.js, otherwise again it's going to throw an error. So let's just save that. Let's go back to a browser and let's try to move the mouse, and again things works just like before, but this time it's using the Lodash function. So that's about it for this video. I hope you found that useful, and if you do, I would really appreciate if you can subscribe. I'm just starting off this channel and it's going to be very helpful for me. So that's it, and see you in the next video.